Greetings and salutations, my friends. My name is Samantha, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of a chatty video. I'm going to be talking about how I started reading and how I started reading historical romance, because somehow, without even realizing it, my channel has become like a historical romance channel. And I'm not mad about it, but I thought it would be fun to kind of chat with you guys and tell you guys how I started reading. I don't know, is this video interesting? I don't know. I just really love sitting down and chatting about romance and romance books and reading. It's just like, it's therapy for my soul. And the other day, my mom had asked me, Samantha, how did you start reading historical romance? Because I just recently started reading historical romance. And I was like, you know what? That's a really good question. And I was telling her, you know, the whole spiel, and she was like, that would be a really good video idea. So here I am. Truthfully, if you guys don't want to sit here for like the whole video, I started reading historical romance because of the historical readathon that was back in March, I want to say. Yeah, not too long ago. I think it was in March, hosted by Jessica, Lacey, Lisa, you know, like the wonderful trio of romance booktubers. And that's how I started reading historical romance. Read a few historical romances in that readathon, and I just loved them so much, and I kept going, and that's kind of where we are. I do have a little bit more of a like chatty story that goes with that, but that's like the short version if you guys didn't want to sit here for the whole video. Sorry if I keep touching my hair. I washed my hair this morning and I didn't put any product in it, and I just let it air dry and do its own thing, but it's driving me a little bit crazy right now. So let's start with like my reading journey. We'll start from the beginning on when I first remember reading and enjoying reading. And I vividly remember, okay, I don't have a very good memory, but I remember this very well. In the second grade, my teacher would read us the American Doll series. After recess, she would allow us to come in after our second recess, I believe, and we would get to rest our heads on the desk, and she would read a story or a chapter from the American Doll series. So it's like the American Girl series. They have dolls that go with the books. I think there's even like movies or TV shows. I'm not too sure, but I know that I vividly, I'm using that word too much, but I remember sitting in my second grade classroom with my head on the desk and listening to her read, and it was my favorite part of the day. And even more so, one of the American Doll girls' name was Samantha, and I remember thinking like, oh my god, that's so cool, her name is Samantha, like me. I felt really special, and it was such a good time, such a good memory. And I can genuinely remember that being the first book that I just loved and continued to spark my love for reading. And I think it was so magical because my teacher was reading the stories out loud to us, so it wasn't something that we had to sit down and read a story and write an essay or anything like that. It was literally just 15 minutes of her reading the story, allowing us to kind of just chill out and enjoy the experience. We didn't have to write anything. It wasn't a homework assignment. It was just a really fun time, and I really thank my second grade teacher for that because she sparked my love for reading for sure. So that was the first time I remember reading, and then we were going on to the third grade. I had another amazing teacher who I still remember to this day, and I went to a really small school. I went to the same school from preschool all the way to 12th grade. I graduated at that school, never went to any other school, so I remember my teachers, and my class was very, very small, so I remember these incidents. And we had a book report. We had to read a book, and then we had to do a diagram for a scene in that book in the third grade. And I remember reading a book called Daniel's Story, which, looking back now, I don't know why I read that book in third grade. I feel like maybe that wasn't like maybe a little intense for a third grader, but it was called Daniel's Story, and I don't remember the author. I'm gonna see if I can find the book and pop it on the screen. Again, I haven't reread this as an adult, and it was about the Holocaust, and I remember that being like the very first book where I felt emotional. Like I cried in the third grade about this book. The diagram that I did was the little boy in the concentration camp, and there was a fence, and he had found a friend, and that girl was on the other side of the fence, and they would come and try and talk to each other. It's kind of like The Boy in the Striped Pajamas in that way, and I just remember loving this book. I cried. My little third grade self cried. I did the diagram. I was super, super proud of it. And yeah, so the third grade was another year I just remember loving to read, wanting to know more. Even like this intense book, I was just like, loving it. You know what I mean? This is the 3rd grade, and I feel like the 2nd grade is when I was introduced to reading. The 3rd grade is really when I fell in love with reading. So now we are on to the 4th grade, and this is another monumental time that I remember in my reading journey because, again, I had a teacher. Now, I didn't like this teacher. This teacher was so mean. I swear every single kid in my class cried at one point or another. Like, just cried and bawled their eyes out because this teacher was so mean. Oh gosh, I feel bad saying that, but it's so true. But I have a really good memory from that class because she used to read this book. It's called Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein. Okay, my camera actually cut off. I don't know where I left off, so I know I was talking about Where the Sidewalk Ends. This is basically just a collection of short stories and poems for kids. If you have kids in your life, this is such an amazing gift because these poems are just so fun, and I remember loving them. Like, there's just so many good ones in here. And when my teacher was reading them, she would read them in all of these like funny voices. And my favorite poem was the boa constrictor one. Looks like this. I don't know if you guys can see. And it's basically a man talking about being eaten by a boa constrictor. So really great poems there. I just remember it being so fun, and the wonderful thing about it was like it was kind of like in 2nd grade we would just come back from recess, we would lay our heads on the table, and she would just read these stories to us. We didn't have to write like an essay or a book report. It didn't feel like school in that moment, and it was always one of my favorite parts of the day. So I'm really thankful that I had teachers like that because I feel like that really shaped my love for reading, and I don't know if I would be a reader if I didn't have those teachers in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade, because that was such an influential time in my life, having these adults read to me and it be fun, you know? My parents also were huge supporters of reading, and they would read to me. My mom would take me to Barnes & Noble, and she would let me stay in Barnes & Noble for hours. I would just sit on the floor and flip through all the books, and it was just so much fun, and I'm so thankful for that because I feel like this is really the time in my life where I started to love reading. Moving on to like junior high, I don't really remember what books I was reading in like the 5th grade, the 6th grade, but I know around the 6th and 7th grade, at the end of my junior high years, Twilight came out. So Twilight was huge in my school. All the girls, we had all the books and we would pass them around and we'd talk about them. We were super excited to see the movies, and Twilight was kind of a huge thing in my school. You can trash Twilight all you want, but it's good for what it is. It was such a fun series for me to read. And I remember, I know I've told the story on my channel before, but I remember just being so obsessed with the movies. Like, I needed to see the movies. Robert Pattinson was my everything, you know? I fell in love with him when he was Cedric Diggory in Harry Potter, and I loved him when he was Edward in Twilight. It was just such a good time. Such a good time. So I remember being super obsessed with the books and wanting to see all the movies. So my dad, I have very strict parents. I was not going to any midnight movie premiere by myself. I wasn't even going to a midnight movie premiere with me and my friends. You know, I had to go with someone they knew or go with them. So my dad knew how important these books were to me, and I really wanted to be a part of like this midnight movie premiere that was happening by my house. So he took me and like 6 of my friends, all these girls, we all piled up in the truck, and we went to the midnight movie premiere, and he watched the movie with me, and he was interested with me. He bought me the shirt and just like showed interest in what I had interest at the time, even though like as a grown adult, he probably did not care anything about vampires. I'm sure he slept through the movie, but I just remember thinking that was so cool, you know, that my dad was like interested in what I was interested in and let me have that moment. After reading Twilight, I read a ton of vampire and werewolves books, like that paranormal books. That's all I wanted to read, and that's all I read in junior high, truly. After I read Twilight, I read the House of Night series by PC Cass and Kristen Cass. This is a bind up of the first 2 books. I haven't reread this series as an adult, and all I can remember is that it is a series about vampires. I think there was like 12 books, and I read all of them. So it was about vampires and had a lot of like Greek gods and goddesses vibes in them as well. So I just remember loving this book so much. As I was preparing for this video though, I was going through the Goodreads reviews, and a lot of people were saying that this book has some problematic elements just in the way they describe characters, their attributes, and the lack of diversity in this book or in this series. So I don't know if I would recommend it now. I don't recall those things when I read it as a kid, but again, I don't really remember the entire series. I just remember it being about vampires, and it was one of those first books that really got me into reading. So if you were to read this book now, definitely would recommend reading those Goodreads reviews, checking for any trigger warnings, just in case. But I had to mention this book because I do remember it being one of the very first books that I ever read. So yeah, this is the House of Night series by Kristen Cass and PC Cass. Yeah, that started my love for reading as well because I read a ton of vampires and werewolf books. I don't even remember half of those books anymore because I gave them away. I'm so mad that I did that. I reached a point in like high school from like 10th to 12th grade that I stopped reading. I wasn't really interested in reading. I had to read like, you know, classic literature, required reading because of school, and having required reading in school really like messed with my brain, and completely I wasn't into reading as much after that. So I kind of stopped reading for a little bit, and I gave away a lot of the books that I read in junior high and high school, which makes me sad. Anytime I go to like the thrift store or a used bookstore and I see those books, I always pick them up. So it's funny how they're kind of like making their way back into my life. Speaking of required reading, I had a really awesome English teacher in high school. She was one of my favorite English teachers. I think I had her the 10th and the 11th grade, and she was just one of my favorite people in the entire world. Like, one of those teachers that really made a difference. There wasn't a ton of required reading in school that I liked. I didn't like having to be told to read something and I had to read it in a certain amount of time, and then I had to dissect it into an essay. I don't know if I'm like the only one, but I didn't like that. But there was some books that I really enjoyed. Dracula was one of them. Again, with that whole vampires, paranormal. Really enjoyed this book. It's dark. It was interesting. I loved it. I also remember reading The House on Mango Street. That book was good. I remember reading The Odyssey, and in my senior year in high school, I loved The Odyssey so much. That's like the time that I got more into like Greek gods and mythology and all that stuff. I love that book so much that I literally found a way to include that book in every single essay that I wrote my senior year. So I used it as references or like comparison. I found a way to include this book because I loved it so much. So those were some books in high school that I remember reading, but I didn't do a ton of reading for fun in high school. I don't know. I kind of like lost my love of reading. Sad. Oh my gosh, this video is getting so long. I just feel in my bones. I feel like I can split it up into like me reading in high school and elementary and then me reading now, but we're gonna keep going. Hopefully you guys are still with me. Hopefully you are still enjoying. Oh, like I mentioned, I didn't do a ton of reading in high school. I didn't do a ton of reading after high school. Right after high school, I didn't do a ton of reading for fun. It wasn't until I was probably 21, 22. I'm 23 right now. So I just rediscovered my love for reading about 2 years ago. And that's when I discovered Booktube. So all this time I was reading in high school, I did not know Booktube existed. I was in this very sad world where I didn't know that Booktube existed. I don't even remember how I stumbled across her video, but the very first video I watched was Hannah from A Clockwork Reader. I remember stumbling upon one of her videos, and it was like a book tag, and I loved it so much. I was hooked. Like, I ended up watching all of her videos, and I remember after watching all those videos, I immediately went out and bought The Night Circus by, oh gosh, who is it by? I have the book. Hold on. Booktube is screaming at me right now that I didn't remember the author's name because this is such a popular book on Booktube, but this is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstein. Hannah loves this book, and I ended up reading it because of her, and boom, my love for reading was back. I read a lot of fantasy at first, but then I really started reading romance, which is where we are today. And yeah, so Booktube kind of sparked my love for reading all over again. The first romance that I read as an adult and kind of getting back into reading was Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating by Christina Lauren. I remember sitting down in my bed and I read this in one sitting, one day. I was so hooked. I went out and bought a bunch of other Christina Lauren books, and I love their writing. That was what got me into romance again. I just rediscovered my love for these books and for reading, and it was like I couldn't get enough. I ended up setting my Goodreads goal for that year to 12, and I ended up reading like 90 books that year. So I went from reading 0 books a year to like 90 books a year. So it was just a really fun time. It was only like 2 or 3 years ago, but it was really fun to rediscover my love for reading, and that is kind of what made me start this YouTube channel. I ended up starting this channel because of Hannah from A Clockwork Reader. She got me into Booktube, and then also because of Chandler. I will link both of their videos, or both of their channels, down below. Chandler is such an amazing booktuber. She reads a lot of romance. She reads, I feel like she reads a pretty good diverse range now. She reads thrillers, YA, romance. I loved her videos. I loved her creativity so much. And she had this series on her channel where she kind of broke down how to start a YouTube channel, like how to do thumbnails, how to make creative videos, and it was just such an inspiration, and that's how I started my channel. And I do actually have a video reading my booktuber's favorite books, which is Chandler's favorite books. I feel like I'm over explaining. I will link the video and her channel down below. Okay, so now that leads me up to how I started reading historical romance. Gosh, I feel like this video has been so long, so I might split this video up into two, or this might just be a really long chatty video. But I ended up reading historical romance because of a readathon that happened back in March. So I've only been reading a historical romance for a couple of months. It feels like longer because it was just around the time that I was starting to make videos on my channel. It was a historical romance readathon by three lovely ladies, some of my favorite people on Booktube. We have Jessica from Peace Love Books, Lacey from Lacey Book Lovers, and Lisa from Remarkably Lisa. They all came together, did a really fun, I think it was like a week-long historical romance readathon. I did do a video of me reading historical romance for the first time, so I will link that down below. I fell in love with the books that I read in that readathon. The very first author that I read was Lisa Kleypas, and I read this on Lacey's recommendation. She talked about Lisa Kleypas so much, what an amazing, author she was, and I fell in love with her books. I do have an entire Lisa Kleypas video as well. I'll link that down below. So many shameless plugs, right? So the very first Lisa Kleypas book I read was Suddenly You, and this book follows a woman who is nearing 30 and she's still a virgin. So as a birthday present to herself, she decides to hire a male escort, and that is how she ends up meeting our hero in this book. And it's just a funny book. Actually not a male escort. The woman that she was speaking to kind of played matchmaker and sent him to her house. He is a publisher who wants to publish one of her books because she is a writer, and I just love their banter. And I remember reading this book and thinking like, oh my gosh, this book is really good. This book is really good. This book is amazing. Like, it was just so amazing. And look at this lovely step back. I just love this 2-page step back. So I loved this book so much that I ended up reading like 5 Lisa Kleypas books after that. I want to read her entire backlist. Lisa Kleypas is still one of my favorite authors. She has an entire shelf dedicated to just her books right here. I want to collect all of them. So the other one that really just got me into reading historical romance is Again the Magic. I know this is a lot of people's favorites because everybody loves our male hero McKenna. He's just a sweet little bean. This is a awesome second chance romance, and it actually has 2 love stories in this book, and I loved it so much. It really got me into reading historical romance. Once I started reading historical romance, that's when I discovered the historical romance world on Instagram. It is wonderful. It is so positive. It's such a great community, and I love following all of the pages. I got a ton of recommendations from pages that I follow. There is one page that I love so much. Her Instagram handle name is Pink Cowland Reads. I will link it down below, and she has this fun hashtag called Step Back Saturday where she shares all of the sexy step backs. If you don't know what a step back is, you have the front cover right here on historical romance, and then when you open it up you have another cover. It's usually like a lover's embrace or something like that, and I just love them so much. I think historical romance covers are so pretty. I'm addicted to collecting and buying historical romance because of that. So the hashtag Step Back Saturday really, made me buy a lot of books. As you guys can tell, I have a lot of book hauls on this channel, and most of them are historical romance. That is how I started reading historical romance, and also how I started just reading in general. I know this was a lengthy video, but it was really fun going down memory lane, looking back at some of the books that were influential to my reading journey. If you guys like this video, please do a video like this of your own. Let me know how you guys started reading in the comments. I think that's such a fun video. Or what was like the very first book you remember reading as a kid or as an adult. Let me know. I think that's so much fun. And if you do end up making a story time video like this, please tag me so I can watch it. Actually, if you have a YouTube channel, link it down below. Let's share the love. Let's all support each other and watch each other's videos, because I feel like the romance community is such a positive community, and that's really why I've read a lot of romance and kind of have been excited to make these videos because I feel like being in the romance community is such a fun community to be in. If you guys didn't know, I did have a makeup Instagram. I guess I still have it, I just don't post on it a lot. I had a makeup Instagram for about 5 to 6 years, and I would just post makeup looks, makeup products that I liked. I've always loved makeup. It's something I've always been passionate about, and I still am. But the Instagram page wasn't, like, I don't feel like I really got a lot of feedback. I feel like I wasn't a part of a community, if that makes sense. And I had that page for like 5 to 6 years. And then I started my Bookstagram page on Instagram. This was even before I started my YouTube channel. And I only had that page for like 2-3 months, and I felt like I was a part of a really great community. So this community is so good and uplifting, and they're constantly, you know, everywhere you look on Instagram, people are linking resources to read diversely or resources to support other booktubers or small businesses. And it's just such a lovely place to be in. And I love Booktube. I love reading romance. I love all of the romance booktubers, Jessica, Lisa, Lacey, Chandler, just so many amazing supportive people. Another thing is, like, I started this channel because I didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't know a lot of people who were reading books that I was reading, or just reading in general. So I started this video because I wanted to be a part of a community, wanted to talk to people about books, and that's really what happened. And I know that I have such a small following compared to other booktubers, but it just feels really special talking to you guys about books, hearing your recommendations, hearing your feedback. And even when you guys like post on Instagram of you buying a book that I recommended, like, that blows my mind. And just to think that someone would buy a book because I recommend it kind of makes me emotional a little bit. It makes me really happy, and I hope you guys enjoy any books that I'm recommending. Why am I getting emotional right now? I don't know. I need to stop. I'm just really happy to be a part of this community, and I wanted to say thank you. I'm gonna stop because I'm getting a little emotional, and it's making me itchy. Okay, so I'm gonna stop talking now. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend time with me. It means the world to me, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!